What's going on, Badger fans? Let's talk recruiting because we got Brian Smith on the channel, and when he's here, that's what we do. We get some big-time 2025 targets and prospects to talk about. Can the Badgers get them, and what kind of games do they have?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in as always. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? Ever wonder what kind of adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada. Go find your next big adventure. Check them out today at nissanusa.com. Let's get Brian in here. Let's talk recruiting, Brian. It's been a minute.
Hey, man, recruiting's 365. You've been cheating yourself here.
That's true. Let me ask you this. So we got a couple 2025 guys we're going to talk about, people coming to campus. But I had someone tell me this the other day, and this was on the basketball side, but this is a D1 basketball coach. And he told me it doesn't matter anymore how good of a recruiter you are. It's just how much NIL you have. To what degree is that true on the football side, do you think? And that's a very broad question, I understand. But
that sounds like a guy that's at a school that doesn't have name prowess, and they probably don't want to pay. That would be my guess. It's not true completely. Unfortunately, it's the usual suspects that don't have to pay as much because they're the usual suspects. Like Georgia and Bama don't like to use a ton of NIL by and large. There's a few exceptions, but they worry about their locker rooms. It's kind of worked out for them. You know what I mean? Like there's certain schools. Texas has gone the other direction. They've just bought everything to compete with A&M and stuff. Texas is the Wild West because of the oil money. Notre Dame and Penn State won't pay up front. I kind of doubt Wisconsin will either. It just depends, but there's been a lot of disasters with it. So schools are worried about one guy getting money, then somebody else that's already been on campus playing the same spots. Like, why is he getting money? I've already been here. There's no way to make it consistent because either you're going to tick off the recruit, probably more likely his parents, and then you're also potentially going to tick off somebody in your own locker room. So it's a case-by-case basis. And I know there are some kids that have been let go by schools who would have gotten them otherwise because the kid's parent wants guaranteed money up front, this and that. With the transfer portal, you can leave there's the upfront money days are going bye-bye. All these kids love this idea of the transfer. That's going to go less and less as we move forward.
Do you think some of the amounts thrown out are going to become less and less when maybe, like we saw what happened with Texas A&M, right? They basically purchased their way to the number one recruiting class in the country a couple years ago. Half those guys aren't on the roster anymore. Do boosters start to say that's not a great ROI and the money comes down a little bit, or are we not near that point?
Couple of things. Their endowment is $18 billion.
Fair.
So got to compare apples to apples. There's only a few schools like that. Like Notre Dame's is like 19. If they were in it, they could do that too. But you just got to be selective with it. Like they were throwing it at everybody. So the next year when kids wanted it, they didn't want to do it as much. They got killed in recruiting. Like they still had a good class, but they didn't want to spend as much because they had a crappy year. The boosters didn't want to spend. If you do it, you got to win immediately. And it doesn't work that way in football. Freshmen do not win you football games. It is a 3-year investment. That's why this upfront money thing, again, can be iffy to your point. So it depends on the school and it depends on the coach. But if you're going to do it, it needs to be on the back end. Like we're close, you get us over the top, not the starting point.
Very interesting stuff. All right, let's talk to some 2025 prospects because you and I could talk NIL. We're going to do a whole show at some point just talking NIL, where this is headed, your opinion, crazy stories you've heard anonymously with no names dropped. But let's talk some 2025 prospects. All these players are visiting the Badgers at some point, so they have a puncher's. I always say you have a puncher's chance if you can get somebody into Madison during the summer. I want to start with the running back, John Forster, 2025 running back out of New Jersey, 5'10", about 185, kind of a compact guy with some speed. What'd you pick up with John Forster's game when you watched him on film?
More than anything else, I was like, is he a receiver target or a running back target? Which is okay. In today's game, you got to be a 3-down back to be effective, to do the things that they want to do at Wisconsin with their coordinator. And that means throwing them screens, swing passes, some basic look passes over the middle. He can do that. And he's got pretty good gears. I don't think he's unbelievably shifty, but he's got good feet in traffic. He could help Wisconsin. I think he would be a really good number 2. And he could also be a guy you could play in the slot. Ward only knows they need more help outside the tackle box in Madison, so he would be what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, there's a lot of film of him catching balls out of the slot, not breaking stride, hand catching it, making plays after the catch. He's got some running back ability as that receiver in the slot, which would be kind of interesting for sure, breaking some bigger plays. He feels like a guy, and you mentioned it, I don't think he's geared up. He's not like a 4-3 guy, a 4-4 guy, but I think he's fast enough. I think he's shifty enough. He's a guy who seems solid across the board.
Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of 4-3 guys just walking around. You know what I mean? So those guys are rare. But now 4-6 or whatever, if you can run 4-6 and you make the first guy miss, you can be an NFL Pro Bowl running back. Look at the one for the Rams. He's not a burner. So, Kyron Williams makes first guy miss. Mm-hmm. And if you do that and you can catch, years a long career for you. That's what this guy kind of reminds me of in terms of style. So I would imagine you're going to see this kind of guy in general for Wisconsin. At least every other year, they're going to try to get a guy like this. You can still get your 1985 Big Ten 6'2", 210 guy if you want. But this is the complementary piece, or maybe even your starter, because if you're going to go tempo or move him in motion, he's probably going to be better in the slot than the big guy is.
We're going to take a quick break because I want to spend some time on the next guy, somebody that Brian and I talked a little bit before the show about, a guy that everybody in the country wants. And, Badgers get him a chance. They're getting to visit. What kind of film and what kind of game does Jack Lange have? But that's coming up next. We're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show over at Nissan Motors. This week, Nissan's bracket highlight is brought to you over by Nissan Motors and the all-new 2024 lineup of SUVs. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out just a little bit more. This week's team is UConn. The Huskies are the Armada because they are just crushing people. That team is a wagon. They've beaten everybody handily. They've got 13 straight wins. They have the longest streak, actually, of NCAA tournament wins by 13 points or more since, I think, the 80s. They are absolutely on fire. They are fast, powerful, strong, just like the Nissan Armada. This week and this year, take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, and the Nissan Armada. Go out and find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Go find your next big adventure over at NissanUSA.com with their all-new 2024 lineup of SUVs. Today's episode is also brought to you by Better Together. Are you tired of that same old daily fantasy grind that it seems like everybody's copied, everybody's replicated, everybody does? It's kind of boring. It's kind of blah. It's kind of the same. You're on an island by yourself. You're doing it alone. Go do it a little bit better at Better Together, where you can pair up. It is the first collaborative, cooperative, community-driven daily fantasy platform where you can team up with somebody, your bros, your compadres, your compatriots, your teammates, your boys, your girls, whoever it is. Team up together over at Better Together so you can cheer each other on. Work your way up the ladder board together as a strategy. It is so much more enjoyable than doing it yourself, getting frustrated by yourself, having it all on you. Go watch sports with your boys, and while you're doing it, work collaboratively with them with daily fantasy over at Better Together. You're creating that shared experience, which is the biggest driver of fandom anyway. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code LOCKEDON because winning alone is fun, but it is better together. All right, let's get Brian back on here. Brian, this is a fun prospect. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn, by the way. That is the official recruiting sponsor of the Locked On Network. And we talked a little bit about this offensive lineman, 2025 offensive lineman. This guy is a absolute beast. I want to get the Eureka, Missouri is the high school. I was trying to remember the name. Jack Lange, 6'8", 275 pounds, huge frame, moves really well, 4-star player, offers from everybody. Thoughts on his game, Jack Lange?
He can play right tackle or left tackle. I would imagine he will end up playing left. He's got offers from like Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, like everybody. He's the kind of guy that you're going to get and make a bookend tackle for 2 years before he turns pro. He reminds me some of the guys Wisconsin's had at left tackle, Michigan, Notre Dame, guys that went first, second round over the last 10, 15 years. And I think he'll take over. Like some of the schools he went to, he might even start by the end of his freshman year. For his size, he has tremendous feet. He's got good balance. He's been coached pretty well. And he plays just outside of St. Louis, so he's played against pretty good competition too. I'd imagine this is a kid that would be the top of the board for many schools. And if you get him, you got an offensive tackle for at least a couple of years as a starter.
Yeah, and you mentioned come in, maybe even play a little bit as a freshman, but he's basically, in your opinion, you get him in, first year, you redshirt, learn the playbook, whatever, and then he's a 2-year starter and he's gone. That's the prototype here.
Probably. I mean, that's why I think you play him some. Yeah, he's never going to be a fifth-year senior anyway. So
Right.
why bother? That's kind of how I look at it. There aren't many guys that have his reach, man. He can get beat on a play and still get the block. And that's why I say measurables all the time. Wisconsin needs more measurables at other spots. Offensive tackle has never been the real problem, but this is a guy that kind of fits that mold for them and probably more athletic than about anybody they've ever signed to. He is a very athletic kid. So Jack Lange can go whatever school he wants.
Yeah, it feels like as Wisconsin has modernized their offense a little bit with Phil Longo coming in, this feels like a little more modern offensive lineman for them as well.
Yes. That's something I always wondered about. If you're going to go tempo and you're going to use guys that can get in the slot, that are running backs, get a little smaller there, get a little faster, you got to have linemen that can literally after the play have to hustle down the field as much as they hate it and be ready to go again against a guy that's smaller and faster than they are. So guys like Lange are, in a lot of ways, more important than even a receiver or corner is to Wisconsin. I always bitch about those spots, but
yeah, you
do. If you're going to go no huddle, and Longo wants to do that at some point, you need pure left tackles. There's only a handful of those guys, though. There's 133 schools, and there are about 10 of them in the country each year. It's a terrible ratio, but he's one of them. He can play it.
Let me ask you this. Evaluating high school offensive linemen, even when they're playing against better competition in better spots, he's listed at 6'8", 275. I don't know exactly how accurate that is. How difficult is it knowing he's going to put on 30, 40 pounds? This is probably a little easier eval than other offensive linemen just because he has, like you said, really good feet. He moves really well. He's got great reach, but you still have to project out what's he going to look like at 310 or 315, wherever he ends up.
A couple of things with that. You're right. How does a guy carry the weight? And it's more mentally than it is physically because these strength programs, nutritionists, they'll be good. But are you going to accept it and do you like it? Some kids don't want to put on that much weight. Some want to put on more and like they fight with the program and it deters how it works out. And then you also got to just wonder this technique. Jack Lange is still a high school player. Mm-hmm. The difference between Wisconsin and Eureka High School are pretty big. So I don't take anything against, their program in any way, but I'll go with whoever it is at Wisconsin. Analyst, assistant O-line coach, head coach, OC, I'll go that route. They have to make their living based on making decisions on who should and shouldn't start, even if you're higher ranked. So kids still got to earn it. And O-line is just technique. That's why O-line and quarterback are the hardest to project for the draft because some of the best talent never even starts in college because they don't want to put in the work. You can't predict that. Like at corner, if you're just halfway putting in effort, if you're just really, really gifted, they have to play. There's hardly anybody to play it. You're going to play more likely. It's the number one spot that coaches bitch about. Kids don't want to play it. There's not enough of them, and you need a ton. Tackle is a little different. There's more of them, and now it's who's going to put in the work. So, yeah, it's hard, man. But I'll take a kid with his feet, too. Like you mentioned, he's borderline like a tight end. He's not that athletic, but he's borderline like a tight end. That's always a good sign for an offensive tackle prospect.
Yeah, he moves really well. Any feel, I know it's still kind of early, there's a lot of visits come up. Any feel with timeline or where you think his recruitment might go?
Timeline is almost always the same with offensive linemen, barring something unforeseen. It's summer. Linemen commit early. There's a few exceptions, but especially a Midwest kid, like he lives 15 minutes from St. Louis. He's going to probably make a decision no later than August 1st, if I was to guess. It's the usual suspects, a handful of Southern schools, Michigan, Notre Dame, Georgia, and stuff like that, Wisconsin. I haven't even looked at his visit list yet, to be honest, because I know this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. One of my buddies thinks he's the best tackle in the country, while one of the services had him like recently, like number 14. So there's again, it's really wide variety. The only thing I can take against him, like he doesn't live down south where I do, and every other school has got a 250-pound defensive lineman. There just aren't as many bigs in Missouri. So he's probably murdering somebody's child every Friday night and mom watching the stands. But that's the only thing because the body and everything that he has is why, like, Georgia doesn't have to recruit in St. Louis. They don't. They don't have to leave, outside of about a 250-mile square radius of where their campus is. And they went all the way up there. Notre Dame goes there. They get all kinds of linemen. Wisconsin gets all kinds of linemen. They're going down there. This kid's the real deal. So he may back it up a little bit, but my guess is July to early August.
How good is that football there near St. Louis, high school football, maybe compared to other places in the country?
Missouri is a track outside area. It's the city that Wisconsin needs to live in, is what it is. All the guys they don't get, I bitch about and their fans bitch about, live in Missouri. Track. Kids that can go. Receiver out the yin yang. There's a lot of skill guys. Kyron Williams played at Notre Dame with the Rams. Skill guys. There's a few defensive linemen and stuff, but it's about speed there. So Jack is kind of the anomaly. There's been more linemen for whatever reason on the other side of the state at Kansas City. I don't know why. It's kind of random. But that city has a lot of track talent, and they usually come from the parochial school. So he's at the random public school in Eureka. That's a kid that once every 50-year kind of deal. Just they better enjoy it for this last year.
It's funny. We have a guy who listens to this show a lot. His name's JB. He likes you, by the way. He's always telling us that Wisconsin needs to be more active in St. Louis.
It's true. 100%.
He's going to like hearing this segment.
Well, they forget his 10, 15 years. They got a running back out of there. He was their star. He got drafted. I can't remember who it was, but he was a St. Louis.
Monte Ball was a Missouri kid.
That's it. Like the state's good. It just doesn't have a large number, but the kids they produce, they'll have one or two kids in the top 30 in the country. It's just so random. But St. Louis, good starting point for outside the state of Wisconsin if you're the Wisconsin staff.
Well, and close enough where you can still sell some proximity. Your parents can get to games.
Yeah, it's just far enough away to get a college experience, but mom's not right next to you. It's kind of the happy medium. I mean, it's a drive, don't get me wrong, but like you can make that, and it's also not a difficult flight either.
Right. No, exactly. Let's talk about one of our favorite positions to talk about. Let's talk defensive line, Brian. Let's talk some the big hogs. There's a couple 2025 kids coming in for visits. Let's start with Luke Waffle. I think I pronounced that correctly. I'm not 100% sure. Out of Princeton, New Jersey, 6'4", 235-ish pounds. He is a composite 4-star. Very good offer list. Notre Dame, Michigan, Nebraska, multiple schools in it. It's about 14 or 15 offers. What do you think of Luke Waffle's film?
He's a kid that's a really talented player, but he is 26, by the way, not 25.
Oh, yep, 26.
His brother just signed with Michigan. This kid's just as good or not better than his brother at the same time. Going to end up being a strong side end or a 3-tech. Great hands, understand how to work the guy in front of him, use multiple moves. This is a big-time player. This is the kind of kid that, being from the Hun school, like that's, they take academics serious with their social life and all that. This is the kind of kid that Wisconsin has to find a way to get, especially since Michigan just lost their entire defensive staff. His brother signed there with the Wolverines. So I would be surprised if Wisconsin wasn't at least able to have some inroads with it. They've always recruited New Jersey pretty well. So that's the kind of kid that it's probably more important than anybody else on the show today. They're getting kids that are elite players a year ahead. If you're not doing that now, you have no shot. You're not going to get top 100 kids like Ohio State and Florida State and Miami, Notre Dame. Some of these schools, they're getting a bunch of 26 kids on campus already. So you got to do it too. Good for the Badgers.
Let me ask you this, because it feels like the longer you have Luke Fickell and his staff here, the more they're able to make those connections years in advance. Like last year, they were starting over kind of fresh with Wisconsin. Certainly had some connections in Cincinnati, but you are recruiting a different caliber of player at Wisconsin. Now they're able to start establishing those longer-term relationships.
It's everything to have recruited a kid for multiple years. What do I always say? They pick the what? The coach, not the letters on the shirt. Wisconsin's got a rep now for linemen, etc. Longo's got a rep as a coordinator, and they're starting to get some skill guys. They got a couple of decent quarterbacks. You still got to get the elite. I mean, this is the one shortcut will never change is D-line and corner. There's no shortcut there. Getting a guy like Waffle, for instance, just to use him, gets you into that position. It's not, you need to get 2 or 3 of them a year is the thing. That's hard, but those are the ones that go to the playoff. Either you do or you don't. You can go look at the number. It's insane. If you don't get big-time defensive linemen, you have no shot.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. We're going to take one more quick break and talk about another 2025 defensive lineman coming up after the break. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And also a quick second to just say thank you to everybody who's tuning in. Today's friends of the show over at Amazon Fire TV. Amazon Fire TV, again, something I use, something I talk about, something that honestly makes watching sports so much easier for me. It is your sports destination. They have all sorts of channels. And it's more than just sports. You can watch gaming, travel, food shows over there. Plus, they launched Fire TV channels, fast channels. So basically, what you use is this constant supply of the latest videos from all your sports brands, all for free. And that also includes us over at the Locked On Network. So you can see more of Brian Smith on your Amazon Fire Stick. That's reason enough to go get it. Your sports destination. Learn more. Visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And again, keep up to date with the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, which is still going on. NBA playoffs coming up. Baseball, lots more. Again, go check out Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, let's get Brian back on. And I mean, who doesn't want to see more of Brian Smith?
I appreciate that. I hope people enjoy the recruiting. It's fun for me.
People really do, man. I always tell you this: the majority of people enjoy the frankness that you speak of, the good and the bad.
It's important. I'm not going to raise somebody or drown somebody. I'm going to tell it like it is.
All right, let's talk Gordy Sulfsted, 25 defensive lineman coming out of St. Xavier in Ohio. High 3-star kid, 6'5", 240. Pretty good offer list. Washington, Iowa. The Virginia schools are in on him. Stanford. What do you think of Sulfsted's film?
He's going to be a strong side end or a swing player that plays 3 technique. He's a guy that plays really hard. He's got some length to him. I wouldn't say he's the kind of sudden guy that Florida State's traditionally going to get, but he can play in a 3-man or a 4-man line. And Wisconsin's probably going to do a little of both based on the history of their coaching staff, so he fits their scheme well. And this is an area that when Wisconsin's good, they always sneak a couple of kids from Ohio onto the roster to do it. They've done it in basketball too, for that matter. So I think it's really interesting. That's a good program. Rocky Boyman, a guy I used to know back in the day, played in the NFL for a long time, was there. They play good football. He's going to be prepared. Now the question is, he's a developmental guy. He's not going to come in and like beat somebody out and start. How big does he get? What do they want to do with him? And how much 3- and 4-man line are you going to play? Because he could be your strong side end in a 4-3 or a 3-3-5, like a stack or something. There's a number of ways you can use him, and that's something that, again, we talked about that on offense. Wisconsin has to do that on defense. The other team's going to go up-tempo as well. You need versatile defensive linemen to adjust to what you see because personnel packages don't mean as much as they used to offensively. 22 personnel could be in 5 wide. That 15 years ago, there was zero chance of that. Somebody was getting fired if that happened. But now it can happen. You got to have guys that can do all kinds of things. Zone fire. You got to be able to blitz. You got to be able to stun. He's a versatile kid that can play multiple spots, so he can help you. I think that's what defenses are looking for now. You're not going to, like in the playoffs, you keep somebody under 35, you've done a really good job.
Yeah.
It used to be like if you give up 35, you're screaming if you're a head coach. Kirby can hardly do that with the guys he has. So that's why you got to have versatile players like this.
Well, to your point, and this isn't a point you made in this show, but you've made this before, you just also need numbers on the defensive line. You need to be comfortable. And this feels like a guy who can he feels like a guy who can contribute in those waves.
You need 3 defensive linemen to the other team's 1 offensive lineman because you're chasing the ball. Defense is about numbers and talent. The thing that coaches have always told me on or off the record, the thing I'll bitch about is, do you hustle? That is it. Like, it doesn't matter what school I'm talking to, high school or college. It's the same lines. You can teach technique, and once a guy gets good at it, if he doesn't do something like an upperclassman, they may get bitched at. But by and large, it's about hustle. Picking up an extra block or bringing down a guy that broke a tackle nobody thought, you're there, fumble, whatever. This kid plays hard through the whistle, and I guarantee you that Fickell and everybody else will love that. So you can never have enough of those guys. That's really kind of the design that Cincinnati had when Fickell was there. Their defense played like their hair was on fire. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to bring that to Madison and run that same kind of scheme, because they were up the field trying to be disruptive, let's be real honest. There was no hidden agenda there. They were going to blitz you to death. You better have versatile guys like this that can be out in the flat when he's in a zone fire situation, or if he really does have to rush the passer, he can bend the edge and get around the corner. So I'm just curious how big he gets.
In your opinion, hustle, hard, running after the ball after the play, chasing down ball carriers beyond the line of scrimmage, that kind of stuff, is that taught? Is that coached? Or is that just something kids have hardwired into them?
A little of both, but like if you're at a college practice, if you want to hear a bunch of words we're not allowed to say on this set, it's when there's a loaf. They count loafs now. It's the number 1 stat in practices, as far as I'm concerned. The kids that have the most loafs stand next to the coach on the sideline. They don't care what their star ranking is. It is coached as well, because even if you're lazy, you know what, if you don't go, I don't care what your talent was, you had a Georgia offer, whatever, you don't go out there and do it, I'll play the walk-on. That's the kind of stuff you hear at practices with some extra words mixed in.
I love it. He is Brian Smith at FBScout_Florida, Locked On's recruiting insider. Also, LinkedIn. This show is also brought to you by LinkedIn, linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Brian, as always, man, I appreciate the insight. We're always smarter because you're on the show, man, and appreciate it as always.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts at the end of spring with Wisconsin and kind of their defensive makeup and everything. Obviously, I don't live up there, but I'm curious what you have to say.
I'm curious too, man. I can't wait for it.
Right.
We'll definitely keep chopping it up with Brian. I appreciate everybody tuning in, listening on Wisconsin, and we'll talk tomorrow.